markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Week. Asian shares trade mostly higher after Israel and Hamas agreed to a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, a move that will allow the release of remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Most regional indices are in the green, except Singapore Straits Times, which trades slightly lower. On the currency front, the US dollar strengthens against the Thai baht, but weakens against most other Asian currencies. The Australian dollar, meanwhile, gains ground against the greenback. In commodities, gold edges down 0.3%, while oil prices are mixed. In cryptocurrencies, both Bitcoin and Ethereum slip by more than 1%. The Bangko Sentral cuts the policy rate by 25 basis points. This brings the country's interest rate to 4.75%. The BSP says the inflation outlook is benign and well within the target range, with inflation expectations remaining well anchored. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte maintain steady approval and trust ratings in the latest Publicus Asia survey. It shows Marcos with a 24% approval rating and Duterte with 36%, both holding firm despite political headwinds. House Speaker Martin Romualdez records the biggest drop, with his approval rating falling from 15% to 7% and his trust rating reduced from 10% to 5%. Former Senate President Cheese Escudero also slips, while Senators Joel Villanueva, Mark Villar, and Jinggoy Estrada see sharp losses. Only Risa Ontiveros gained ground, leading with a 27% approval rating. Institutional trust also slides across the Senate, the House of Representatives, and several departments, including Public Works, Tourism, and Finance, amid public outrage over the flood control scandal. Government officials are at odds over the supposed consequences of the flood control scandal on the country's economy. Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, Frederick Go, calls as fake news statements made by Securities and Exchange Commission Chair Francis Lim that 1.7 trillion pesos worth of market value was wiped out due to the controversy. Go says Philippine investment has not yet lost anything due to the corruption scandal, adding that the negativity has been overblown.
Unfortunately po, the Securities and Exchange Commission chairman was quoting off a confirmed fake news SOCMED post designed to catch attention and falsely sensationalize.
The SEC chairperson earlier said investors have fled the country due to corruption issues. The world in the Philippines brands as a setback the cease and desist order by the National Privacy Commission against Tools for Humanity. That's the entity behind the World app and the Orb verification system. The country manager for World Philippines says the decision could deprive millions of Filipinos of technology designed to protect them from scams, identity thefts, and AI-driven fraud. It also expressed alarm over the decision, citing its collaboration with agencies such as the Department of Information and Communications Technology and the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center to explore solutions to AI-related risks. The Bureau of Customs is investigating the luxury vehicles surrendered by former Public Works Bulacan Assistant District Engineer Brice Hernandez to the Independent Commission for Infrastructure. Chris Bendijo, Deputy Chief of Staff at the Office of the Customs Commissioner, says the agency will look into the taxes paid on the vehicles. He adds they are also evaluating the responses of customs personnel who were issued show-cause orders over their alleged links to the smuggling of luxury cars. But he clarifies their investigation covers only goods imported into the country and not the total ill-gotten wealth of personalities linked to the flood control scandal. A lawmaker is backing proposals to have the private sector conduct parallel inspections on DPWH projects to help prevent overpriced and substandard infrastructure. On BNC's Business 360, Bicol Saro representative and House Infrastructure Committee co-chair Terry Ridon said this should be done at every phase of a project, especially before contractors bill the government.
No, I think they have to give the go-ahead and make a determination on whether the actual phase of implementation was faithful to the actual design and whether the specifications for the project, particularly the materials that had been used, had been faithful to the original design. So I think their intervention will be indispensable, particularly on whether or not the contractor will in fact be paid.
Ridon also supports a proposal to require lawmakers to publicly disclose budget insertions to improve transparency. All these amid the flood control corruption scandal, bringing down public confidence in infrastructure spending. The country's multi-billion-dollar call center industry is at risk as lawmakers in the U.S. tackle a bill which seeks to discourage outsourcing. Let's get the details from Paulo Barcelon, and he joins us now on the line. Hi, Paulo.
Mai, the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines, or IBPAP, says it is closely reviewing a proposed measure in the U.S. to keep call centers in America. IBPAP says they are continuously informing stakeholders and providing timely guidance so that Philippine BPOs can adapt to changing global environments in the sector. The bill, which is currently under the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, aims to stop U.S. companies from sending customer service jobs overseas by making offshoring more expensive through fines and restrictions of federal funding for firms that move more than 30% of their call center operations abroad. Under the bill, a list will be made of companies that will not be rewarded for outsourcing its jobs, barring them from new government contracts for 5 years. Customers would also have to be informed if they're talking to an agent outside the U.S. and given the option to switch to a domestic representative. The proposed law could put at risk the Philippines' $37 billion BPO sector, which employs nearly 2 million Filipinos and relies heavily on American clients. It could also cut a major point of trade between Manila and Washington. Economists warn that if passed, it may force companies to cut back operations here or spend more just to stay compliant. Mai.
Thank you for that report, Paulo Barcelon. The Independent Commission on Infrastructure has recommended that the Public Works Department lower its levels of authority thresholds for the procurement of civil works. From 400 million pesos at the Regional Engineering Office, the limit will be reduced to 200 million pesos, and from 150 million at the district level, it will be lowered to just 75 million. The original threshold for the LOAs was raised during the tenure of Dizon's predecessor, former Public Works Chief Manuel Banon. We're taking a short break. More stories are coming up. You're watching Business Brief. You're back on Business Brief. Ayala-led Asen Corporation infuses an additional 1.9 billion pesos into its subsidiary, operating a 133-megawatt solar farm in Cagayan to fund operating expenses. In a regulatory filing, Asen says it subscribes to over 419,000 redeemable preferred shares of Nature's Renewable Energy Development Corporation, or NAREDCO, at over 4,000 per share, representing 22% of the company. NAREDCO is a joint venture between ASEN, which holds 60%, and Cleantech Renewable Energy 4 Corporation, which owns 40%. It develops and operates the Cagayan Solar Power Plant, which began commercial operations in October 2024. Spanning 115 hectares, the Cagayan Solar Farm generates about 188 gigawatt hours of clean energy each year, enough to power around 45,000 homes. PhilWeb Corporation announces a 1.8 billion peso deal that may lead to a change in control of the company. In a disclosure, PhilWeb says Gregorio Araneta Incorporated, owned by Bilyonaryo Gregorio Araneta, the president's brother-in-law, signed a share purchase agreement with Nexora Holdings Incorporated and Velora Holdings for the sale of its 57% stake, worth nearly 2 billion pesos. As the deal covers more than 35% of PhilWeb's outstanding voting shares, the buyers are required to conduct a mandatory tender offer to remaining shareholders. PhilWeb says the transaction may increase foreign ownership to 40%, but notes this complies with ownership rules since it is not engaged in nationalized activities. San Miguel Corporation is giving bondholders until October 22 to approve changes to several bond terms, including a plan to use its shares in new NAIA Infra Corporation as collateral for project financing. In a disclosure, SMC says the extension will give bondholders more time to review the proposal and complete the required documents. The consent covers multiple fixed-rate bonds maturing between 2027 and 2034, including Series C, G, and P issuances. The U.S. government remains shut with no clear end in sight, and healthcare is at the center of the stalemate. Democrats and Republicans are locked in a standoff, and some Filipino Americans say the impasse is hurting families. Our New York correspondent, Don Tagala, reports.
After days of tumultuous shutdown, there appears to be no signs of reopening the U.S. government's doors. Democrats refuse to vote for the Republican spending bill unless it reverses Medicaid cuts from President Donald Trump's signature policy bill, as well as an extension of the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act tax credits. But Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says he's still hoping to find a bipartisan common ground with Republican House members to reopen the government and pass a spending bill while extending the subsidies to Obamacare. Meanwhile, Republican House Majority Leader Mike Johnson pointed out that while Republicans are ready to negotiate on health insurance tax credits, he said that it's a complicated issue and that it will take time to address this issue, while also falsely claiming that Democrats want to extend free health care to the undocumented. Undocumented immigrants are not qualified to receive Obamacare. Besides, he said the House already did its job by passing a measure that would fund the government until November 21st, and that House Republicans will not be in Washington and will remain in their districts this week. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer argued Johnson is not serious about negotiating healthcare issues by keeping Republicans away from Washington, D.C. this week. With neither party willing to budge to reopen the government, some Filipino Americans who organized a cleanup in Little Manila in Queens, New York over the weekend have this to say.
It could have been prevented, and I feel like that it could have been resolved by having people talk to each other. I feel like that people are so partisan that they're in their own lane that they won't be willing to talk to the other side. And that's what's so sad.
As of 2024, 1.5 million AANHPIs, including Filipino Americans, selected a health plan through Obamacare, while 4.5 million AANHPIs were enrolled in Medicaid in 2020. 45 million people in the U.S. benefit from Obamacare. For Democratic State Assembly member Stephen Raga, fighting to keep healthcare for Americans, including Filipino Americans, is worth the fight.
I think the Democratic leaders are doing exactly what we should all be doing, is not voting on a bill that will take away health care from Filipino Americans who need it, from everyday Americans who need it. This is a Republican-made issue. They have the Senate, they have the Congress, they have the White House. There is no way that they can say, oh, it's the other side.
For others, shutting down what they call a regime that has gone authoritarian is justifiable.
The authoritarian regime that is the Trump administration has increasingly militarized our streets, has kidnapped our neighbors, has put people unjustly in ICE detention and in deportation proceedings. This is an administration that goes beyond the law. There are, millions of migrants here that are coming together to speak up for their rights, to defend one another, to protect one another.
Raga says Republican elected officials can help stop health insurance premiums from skyrocketing by extending the healthcare subsidies. Don Tagala, Bilyonaryo News Channel, New York.
Economists and tax experts warn that scrapping the value-added tax, or VAT, could trigger a fiscal or even an economic crisis. The Bureau of Internal Revenue reports VAT collections of $487 billion in the first 8 months of 2025. Foundation for Economic Freedom President Calixto Chiquiamco warns that abolishing the VAT would plunge the country into a fiscal crisis, driving up inflation, curtailing government spending on social services, and threatening a credit rating downgrade. Cavite Representative Francisco Barzaga has filed a bill seeking to remove the 12% VAT on goods and services, citing its burden on low and middle-income households amid high inflation and rising living costs. He says revenue shortfalls can be offset through wealth taxes and higher excise duties on non-essential and luxury goods, including cigarettes, alcohol, vehicles, and gambling activities. The Department of Transportation is turning over 9 regional airports to the private sector, grouped into 2 bundled packages. The Davao, Dumaguete, and Siargao airports are being prepared for public-private partnerships with assistance from the World Bank. 6 others, including Lawag, Bacolod, and Tacloban, are being handled by the Asian Development Bank. Once approved, these projects will be offered through solicited bidding. Meanwhile, private groups have also submitted unsolicited offers, including a 21 billion peso proposal by the Villar Group to rehabilitate Iloilo Airport. The DOTR has canceled a proposal for Calibo Airport, citing low air traffic compared to nearby Caticlan. We're taking a short break, a look at how Philippine shares did today. When we return, stay tuned. You're back on Business Brief. U.S. President Donald Trump nominates Lee Lipton as the next ambassador to the Philippines. The White House formally submits his nomination to the U.S. Senate on October 8th. Lipton currently serves as interim permanent representative to the U.S. mission to the Organization of American States, where he advances U.S. foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. Lipton brings over 25 years of private sector experience, including leading a successful apparel business and owning high-volume restaurants in Florida. He will succeed Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson, who took office in July 2022. Philippine shares end in negative territory minutes before the Bangko Sentral surprisingly cut the policy rates by 25 basis points. The PSEI falls nearly 0.7% to close at 60.57, making it the worst performer in Asia. The sectoral indices are mixed, with mining and oil rising the most at almost 3%. Financials fall the most at nearly 2%. Decliners outnumber advancers 135 to 72, with value turnover reaching 6.5 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks are in the red, with DigiPlus falling the most at more than 4%. On currencies, the peso trades at 57.86 against the US dollar, up from the previous close of 57.95. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business. Only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.